about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano. Folks, I have been very inconsistent in putting out a program on the actions of our government, the loss of our freedom, policies by our Congress, etc. I've been on and off, and I hope to get a little bit more steady in the way I broadcast. I'm going to start doing this early in the morning so I don't get so involved during the day where I don't wind up doing it. Anyway, I enjoy doing it. I feel very passionate about the issues that we are faced with today, and it disturbs me tremendously that here we are as a nation, and as our nation becomes deeper in debt, we become less and less intelligent and more ignorant of really where we are. And I think that's a combination that's absolutely deadly for every nation. I was watching a video yesterday by Mike Maloney, and of course he does a great job of doing historical work on the fate of empires, and he compares the United States with Rome, and the similarities are staggering, absolutely staggering. You know, Rome had a very large army extended all the way to the western part of East Asia, all the way to Britain and Africa. And here we are doing exactly the same thing. In fact, Ron Paul, prior Senator Ron Paul, a man that I have respected for years, decades, and who has been on this program before when I had my studio at the Cityplex Towers, he mentions the fact that this country has totally lost its way, and now we are a country in which there is little likelihood that we will survive. We will survive as a nation. What really concerns me is that when I speak to people close at home, people that I know, they sound, and don't get me wrong, these people are doctors. I mean, they make a lot more money than I do. I mean, they're intelligent people. But when it comes to what is actually going on in our society, they sound very ignorant. Now, please do not confuse ignorance with stupidity. I mean, these guys, if IQ-wise, these guys blow me out of the water. I mean, don't get me wrong, and they're very nice people. And I think the problem is that we have been indoctrinated in many ways. First, we've been indoctrinated by our school system, which our school system doesn't teach the Constitution at all. They never mention the overbloated government. They just teach what they're told to teach. And what they're told to teach comes directly from Washington, D.C., from the Department of Education. And it's amazing to me how we just mimic what we learn in school, and then when we turn on mainstream television, what do we hear? Well, we hear the same thing all over again. And what disturbs me most is that you'll turn on one TV station, for example, Fox News. Let's pick on Fox News for a second, and of course they take the Republican side, and then you'll turn on MSNBC and they'll take the Democrat side. They say Democratic. It's not Democratic, it's the Democrat side. All right? And it's an extension of our school system. So we become indoctrinated to think and talk and rationalize as we've been taught and the way what we see every single day. You don't hear the third party. And if there's one thing I'd like to see done is actually I'd like to see the Libertarian Party as it's structured, to be changed altogether. I think anyone who runs for office should run either, and it makes no difference which one it is, run as a libertarian Democrat or a libertarian Republican. Just think of that for a second. Here you are, you're a Democrat, but you're a libertarian Democrat, just like a conservative Republican versus a liberal Republican. It's the same issue, right? So you're a Democrat, but you're a libertarian Democrat. But what you're doing is you're running in the mainstream, but you're saying what should have been said in the first place. In other words, what you're bringing out of all those items that are not, all those issues that are not brought up in school, that are not discussed on television, you're bringing it to the forefront. Now, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, they can't eliminate you from the debates. They can't limit you from, although what they do is they take their favorite front runners and they give them most of the airtime and they give you minimal airtime, but at least you'll be there and people at least hear the message. So if I have been asked to run for office again, I did so about 20 years ago, 18 years ago, and it was a horrible experience, but I will never run as a libertarian again because you're disrespected, you're not invited to all of the debates and it's incredibly frustrating. I was pleased to see the whole thing over. I said never again. But if I ever did run again, I would run as a libertarian Republican or a libertarian Democrat. Quite frankly, it would make no difference because the libertarian principles will be there. In other words, it would be a constitutional stance for both parties. Now, you would be shunted by both parties and considered an absolute nutcake, and a radical, left wing, right wing, or whatever they call you these days, But I think it would be a lot more effective. And actually, this is not why I decided to do a program this morning, but I am so concerned about this country. In fact, a good friend of mine, she's a wonderful person. She says, I heard President Trump the other day, and he was absolutely fantastic. Well, I listened to Trump for about, I don't think I stretched it out 15 seconds because I couldn't take it after 15 seconds. And she's saying how great it was. Well, this morning, I look at the debt clock every morning because I'm a monetarist. I watch money. I love money. I love playing with money. And here we are. Our debt overnight, our debt went up about $27 billion in less than 12 hours. $27 billion. If our total debt was $27 billion, it would be considered a lot of money. All right, $27 billion overnight, and we're now over 22 trillion, which doesn't count the off the balance sheet items, unreconciled items, emergency items, military emergency items, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on forever. All right, and it's guesstimated that there's about $1 trillion that are not accounted for yet because it's not in there. So we may be 22 to 23 trillion. But at that point, what difference does it make? It's like saying me as an individual making minimum wage, whether or not I have a $50,000 loan or $60,000 loan. I can't pay it either way. What difference does it make? Well, that's the problem that we have today. So we're mired in debt, and everyone is touting, President Trump on how great he's doing, what a great job he's doing. Well, if he's doing such a great job, how come we're not paying off the debt? Well, that's because he's Mr. Debt. He loves debt. He doesn't care. He's the type of guy that looks at the balance sheet, only looks at the right side, the left side of the balance sheet, doesn't want to look at the right side where your liabilities are. The left side is where your assets are. He goes, look at all these assets we have. Boy, we got plenty of money. He doesn't want to know how much we owe. Now, I used to do financial statement analysis for a major international oil company, and I used to have to approve people for millions of dollars worth of fuel. So I had to know what I was doing. I mean, I goofed up. We lost a lot of money. So I had to make certain that the people who were asking for credit were able to pay it. And the first thing I did is I looked at the right side of the balance sheet, not the left side. I want it on the left side. What do you owe? And once I figured out what you owed and who owned the company, what was the structure of the assets, of ownership, then I said, okay, this is their indebtedness. Let's see if they have the ability to pay it. And then I went to the left side. Well, President Trump, apparently, from the way he operates, he rips it in half, throws the right side out into the garbage, looks at the left side and says, look at all the money we have. We can spend it. We're rich. Well, and that's going to be part of our demise, because we don't have anyone looking at what we owe. And if you notice, it's never mentioned on mainstream television, which I think is abominable. I mean, the first thing they should do is say, folks, today we've just went over 22 trillion and maybe another trillion worth of unreconciled items. We're bankrupt. Why don't they say that in the news? Opening up, first thing. But no, everything is fine. Everything is fine. We're the wealthiest nation in the world. We're the greatest nation in the world. Well, the Romans said that all the way to the very end. The place was burning down, and they said, oh, we're the greatest nation in the world, greatest country in the world. Anyway, I guess I get incredibly frustrated. Well, I think as a result of people going to schools that are run by the government and then watching too much television, George Orwell's predictions are coming through loud and clear. We're just walking around like a bunch of zombies. We don't know what the real issues are. We have over 900 military bases around the world, and we're bankrupt. I mean, what does it take to say we don't have the money? Eventually, what will happen is that we will default, or another major trading partner will say, I do not want to accept the US dollar anymore because it is not backed by anything, and you are so mired in debt that you can never pay it off. And I'm afraid if I hold dollars or buy dollars, bonds from you guys, I will never get my money back. But if I do get my money back, what will happen is I will get it back in inflated dollars. In other words, I may lose 90% of my investment in dollars just because it's been inflated away. And that's exactly where we're going. There's some people who say, you should, watch what you invest in. You should invest in gold, silver, platinum, uranium, and whatever, And I think they have a point. Now, I'm not a big metals guy or anything like that, but they make sense. I mean, if you're going to have money for the future, if you look at our present and where we are going, what would you conclude? You'd have to conclude that the dollar is going to die. Now, I'm not an economist, I'm not a monetarist, I'm not a historian, I'm not even that smart, in fact. In fact, most people will say, you're kind of dumb, and they're probably more right than the people who think I am smart. But it's just logical. I recall when I was young, people bought cars for beautiful cars for hundreds of dollars, And today, in fact, my wife got rear-ended, driving at a stoplight, and the person behind her forgot to stop and totaled our car. And it was a nice Prius. It was 10 years old, but it was in beautiful shape. And we had no intention of trading it in. And bingo, we wound up having to buy a new car. And it's amazing what it costs to buy a new car today. And if you ever notice on television, they don't give you the price of the car. They just tell you, oh, for only, $400 a month, you could own this car, or whatever the case may be. They never tell you the price of the car. Well, I went to the showroom for the first time in years, and I got real sticker shock. Well, that's because the U.S. dollar is losing its value. Now, we did not buy a U.S. car because all the U.S. cars are rated very poorly. So just look at everything that's going on around you. You want to buy a car. I prefer to buy an American car, but you look at the Consumer Report ratings, and they're cruddy. They're terrible, right? You look at the Toyota ratings, they're fabulous. Which one are you going to buy? And the Toyota's not any more money. I mean, would you going to buy something that has a high frequency of repair and versus a excellent frequency of repair and pay less, which one would you do? Well, you can't say, well, I'm American, I'm going to buy American. First of all, most of our parts in our cars are not even made here in America. They're made overseas. Anyway, you see where we're going. Now, I want to touch a little. Well, if you're going to invest in something, I'm not an investment advisor. Believe me, I've lost enough money in investing. I can tell you how to lose money, not how to make money. But think if we were going. If the U.S. dollar is becoming weaker, if it's becoming less valuable, stay out of anything that's dollar denominated. Wouldn't that just make sense? I mean, I'm not a stockbroker. I mean, it just, if something is going down in value, do you want to hold on to, try to catch a falling knife? No. So you buy things that will hold its value, and it could be anything. And I'm not an investment advisor. I have no rights to even talk about this thing, but I would buy things that I think would be increase in value. I would not have bought a car today because I think car companies are going to be in trouble. And if I would have waited another year, I would have gotten this car maybe for $5,000 or $10,000 less than I paid for it, just because they're not going to be able to sell it. But my wife needs a car for work, so we bought a car. Anyway, be that as it may. So, those people who are telling you to buy things that the world will need. For example, I saw a map the other day of the growing populations around the world, and it was kind of interesting. And if you just think of that, forget about economics, forget about being a forecaster and all that. If the world population is increasing, and in fact they say in the next 10 years it's going to triple, something like that, to me it was mind-boggling. What are people going to need? Well, they're not going to need a fancy car. They'll need cars, yeah. They'll need more things, but they're going to need energy. So, if you put your money in the energy sector, that may not be a bad idea, especially oil and gas and stuff like that. Now, I know the people who are going to solar energy and things like that, that's probably a good idea also. But if you just look at it from a global point of view and the number of people who are going to be consuming, agriculture and energy and all that, probably is not a bad place to be if you have a long-term horizon. Of course, at my age, my horizon's getting very narrow, so that's it. All right. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit today is about the wall. Now, this thing with the wall bugs the hell out of me. I'll be honest with you. I think this is horrible. This is one of America's biggest mistakes. People talk about building a wall, keeping them out. No. The way I look at it, build a wall, keep them in. In other words, I become a prisoner now in my own country. I don't want a wall anywhere. If we build a wall with Mexico, shouldn't we build a wall with Canada? I mean, if we're going to build a wall, let's do it right. Let's build it all the way around the entire country. Don't let anyone in, anyone out, unless they can prove who they are and they can be productive, etc. Yeah. Folks, we're bankrupt. We are a bankrupt nation. When are we going to recognize that? When are we going to realize that? When are we going to accept the fact we are a bankrupt nation? When I had Professor Kutlakoff at the University of Boston, one of the top professors in the entire world, in fact, he's been voted in the top 25 economists worldwide by the economic community. 2 years ago, and I never forget this number because it's an oddball number, he said our real debt is $223 trillion. That's almost, or today, that would be 1/4 of $1 quadrillion. That's not the world debt, that's our debt. We couldn't sell the planet Earth for that amount of money. Now, if we're never going to be able to pay off our debt, what's the end result? The end result is that we're going to file bankruptcy. And the way we file bankruptcy is that we don't go to bankruptcy court. We're a nation. We debase our currency. And you say, well, that will never happen. But that has been happening. Why did a car cost $300, $400 back in the 1920s? And why does it cost $40,000 today? Because we've debased our currency. But people say, oh no, because the cars are better. No, garbage. I mean, back then, that was better. That was better relative to where they were living compared to the cars that we have today. So everything's on an equal plane. Everything equals out in the long end, in the long term. So we have a problem in that we are debasing our currency and we will be bankrupt. People will just be starving to death in this country. Now let me get back to the wall. The wall does not keep people out. That really doesn't keep people out. It prevents people who are in from going out. Remember that saying by President Reagan, Mr. Khrushchev, tear down this wall. Remember that? Well, to President Trump, I say, President Trump, tear down this wall. The wall should be taken down, should not be brought up, should not be building up. The people came here, people who come here because they want to work. They go, oh, what about the drugs? That's not their problem. We created that problem because we made it so lucrative for gangsters and the ultra poor to make some money by selling some drugs or growing drugs and shipping them here. That's their means of survival. If you legalize drugs, we would put the cartels in Mexico out of business. And the towns would no longer be run by the cartels. They'd be run by regular politicians as they had been in the past before the drug war. And people would not be leaving their hometown to come to America because they would be living in their hometown. People do not want to leave their families. They don't want to leave their connections. They don't want to leave their cultures. It's a very painful thing for them to do. People walked hundreds and hundreds of miles to come to the border, to come to the United States. They didn't come here because they wanted a job. They came here because they can't get a job where they're living because it's run by the cartel. And it's run by the cartel because the United States finances the cartel. If you made drugs legal, they wouldn't make any money. People could grow drugs in their backyard, take all the drugs you want. They say, well, people will take drugs. I go, well, people are taking drugs now. Those people who want to take drugs are taking them. And instead of paying 3 cents, they're paying $50. I mean, Portugal made all drugs legal. Drug use went down, rehabilitation went through the roof. And they're not having problems that they had before. Now, we want to build a wall which will prevent the migration of animals back and forth. We're going to screw up the ecology of the whole place, right? And what we're going to do is make drugs more expensive because the wall is there, and it's going to be more difficult to get over to us, which means the prices will go up, which will make the drug cartel even richer. In fact, the drug cartel right now is richer than the entire country of the United States. If in fact they want to get drugs in the United States with the money that they're making, you know how they do it? They did tunnels. They dig tunnels now. That's how they're getting it over here. And if you look at any map, here I got a map right here. Look at that. Look at that wall. It's over 2,000 miles. Well, are we going to police 2,000 miles of wall? That's going to cost us billions of dollars a year. But how can we do it? We're broke. We're broke. What's the matter with you people? Don't you understand that we're broke? And they say, well, what about the drugs? The drugs. Well, people who take drugs, and they're paying high dollars for it. It's not the people in Mexico that are forcing us to take drugs. It's Americans that are peddling the drugs here. It's not the cartel that's causing the drug problem. It's our own gangs. It's our inner cities. And why? Well, anytime you get the government involved in anything, and that's in building housing for the poor, I don't care what they do, they always screw it up. I lived in Harlem. I loved New York. I loved Harlem. I sang doo-wop back in the 50s. Yeah, I'm one of the doo-wop guys. You know, I can start singing to you right now some of the old songs, which I'll spare you right now. But here we were. We lived on First Avenue, 123rd Street, right? It was maybe considered mafia territory, but that's another story. And Mayor Wagner came to visit my father because my father had a factory underneath this place where we lived. And my father came here as an immigrant, just came in, no papers, no nothing, no permission. He just came to Ellis Island. They let him in and he got a job. And his first job was at a Polish piano factory where they beat the hell out of him every day because he worked so hard. He's making everybody look bad. He used to tell that story all the time, how the Polacks used to beat him up at the Polish piano factory. Anyway, I have no animosity, by the way, towards the Polish. I mean, I thought it was kind of funny. But the mayor came over and said, hey, we're going to knock down all these houses. And they were beautiful houses. They were brownstones. Brownstones were beautiful houses. All had gardens in the backyard. And it was a racially mixed neighborhood. My best friend was a Puerto Rican. This is 1955. 54, 53, somewhere around there. My best friend was a Puerto Rican, Carlos Rivera. It was a great neighborhood, fully integrated. There were stores. Underneath all of the apartment, there were stores. There were candy stores, tire stores, bakeries. There was my father's glove factory. There was the Morris's grocery store. People lived and worked there. At the gloves place, they used to sew gloves. There were 200 people, 200 girls working there sewing gloves. 200. They knocked it all down, put high-rise buildings in there, projects in there. No jobs at all. All the jobs left. They all went to the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, somewhere else. They just left, right? They built these, put all the people in these city-subsidized housing, instant slum, no jobs, and the only way they can make more money is to have more kids. Now, I don't blame the people. I don't blame the people at all. I blame the government. My point being is that wherever the government walks in, that's where you have a problem. The government comes in, that's where you have a problem. Because the root of all our problems comes from a government program. Every single one of them. You can't, I asked somebody, comments at libertytalkradio.com, write me and show me one program where if it wasn't for the government, we would have solved the problem. Every problem was exacerbated or created because of a government problem. So I don't want the wall. We can't afford it. How can we afford a wall that's going to cost us billions? Here, listen to this. It hurts to say it. Billions of dollars. Billions of dollars we're going to spend on a wall that we don't have. We're $250 in debt. And we get further in debt every single day. In fact, it's every so many hours we go another $1 billion in debt. And he wants to build a wall. This president is something wrong with him. Please, if there's anyone out there who's listening to this program, would you sit down with President Trump? With all due respect, I dislike the guy, but someone's got to educate this guy. What we are doing is we are becoming Russia. We're becoming, Mr. Khrushchev, tear down this wall. We are becoming Russia. No, we're becoming the Soviet Union of North America. Why can't we see that? We have troops all over the place. That's what Russia had, the Soviet Union had. They built walls. That's what we're doing, building walls. They're going bankrupt. We're going bankrupt. Hey, I wonder if there's any similarities. Well, you bet there is. And I think everything that our government is doing, absolutely everything, our education system, everything, wherever the government gets involved, it screws things up. I think they should clean out Washington. We should go back to our founding fathers. There should be a few people in Washington just to make certain that your rights are not infringed upon. But we have a bloated, 20 million people, or the 2 million people in Washington now, 22 million people making hellacious salaries, all doing nothing but creating legislation and monitoring people to keep us in line. Hey, welcome to the Soviet Union of America, folks. We have to turn this around. And the only way we can turn around is if we educate ourselves. And the only way we can educate ourselves is to get away from government education, get away from mainstream television, get away from the public school system, or any school, any system, any teaching system where the government has to approve the curriculum. And we have to start thinking as Americans. We have to start thinking logically and critically. And stop thinking, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. That's crap. That's crap. You're an idiot if you think that way. I don't mean to be personal, but I mean, it's stupid. Think to yourself, read the Constitution. Go to the Libertarian website. Go to places like the Future of Freedom Foundation. One of my favorite ones, articles are fabulous. The Foundation for Economic Education. The Cato Institute. And there's several, I'm leaving many out, there are many of them. And I subscribe and I support every single one of them. That's where my money goes. And what I learn from them is enlightening. But I don't learn anything from TV. I just watch TV for entertainment, and it's dumb. It's a waste of time. Our time now is running out. I think we're going to be in an economic crisis within probably the next year, at least the next 2 years. And this one, as Jim Rogers said, will not be the worst since the Great Depression. It'll be the worst, including the Great Depression. Well, folks, this is the end of today's program. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their financial support, and I'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. And on YouTube, will you give us a like? I never ask people to do it. Give us a like if you think this is a pretty good program, and let us hear from you. Comments at libertytalkradio.com. Okay, from now, stay well. Stay tuned.